In a sleek office building downtown, Jacob sat in the quiet lobby, a sense of anticipation settling over him like a heavy blanket. The room buzzed softly with the muted sounds of a nearby conference. People moved in and out, their faces a mix of determination and urgency. But Jacob stayed still, his eyes flicking over to the polished elevator doors that led to the executive suites above. Today was the day. He could feel it stirring in his gut, that strange mix of hope and anxiety. A job he had worked so hard for appeared within reach, and yet he felt so distant, like a shadow waiting to be seen. He glanced down at his hands, the crisp edges of the resume he'd printed just the night before softened by his nervous grip. Each word had been carefully crafted, each detail honed to perfection. But today it felt like that paper was all that stood between him and his dreams. In the months leading up to this moment, he absorbed every piece of advice he could find. He read articles on success, watched countless videos about making it in corporate America, and even practiced his pitch in front of the bathroom mirror. Yet here he sat, waiting and waiting. The minutes stretched out like rubber bands, pulling thin and tight. He could hear the faint chatter from the executives above him, their laughter ringing like a siren call. He wanted to be part of that world, to break through the glass ceiling that felt almost tangible today. Finally, the elevator doors dinged open. A group of 3 executives stepped out, their expensive shoes clicking on the tiled floor. Jacob's heart raced as they strolled right past him. He forced a smile, holding on to hope. What if one of them saw him? What if they noticed him and he made a lasting impression? But they didn't acknowledge him, simply moved on, immersed in conversation. He leaned back slightly in his chair, swallowing the bitter taste of rejection that clawed at his chest. It was a stark reminder of the world he was trying to join, a world where silences could speak volumes, where visibility often came at the price of countless unnoticed moments. Around him, the lobby seemed to maintain its pace. A receptionist typed furiously at her keyboard, barely lifting her head. Jacob imagined the mountain of applications she sifted through, faces like his blurring together into an indistinguishable crowd. The challenge felt immense, a wall he was trying to climb with nothing but his bare hands. Time pressed on and Jacob's thoughts spiraled. He couldn't shake that nagging feeling of insignificance. Maybe he wasn't cut out for this after all. The inner voices whispered doubts to him, each one laced with memories of past failures. The time he stumbled during a presentation in college, the job he didn't get last year, the interview that turned cold halfway through, they echoed like shadows, taunting him. But then a flicker of determination ignited inside him. He couldn't back down now. He had worked too hard, he had come too far. Eventually, the elevator doors opened again, this time revealing several more executives. One of them, a tall woman with sharp features and a striking presence, stepped out and glanced around, her eyes scanning the lobby briefly. Jacob's heart surged at the sight of her. She was the kind of person who seemed to command the room effortlessly. He stood up, smoothing the front of his tie, trying to appear confident despite the anxiety coiling in his stomach. The woman strode toward the exit, and just when Jacob thought he might fade back into the anonymity of the lobby, she caught his eye. For a second it seemed as if the world stopped. She halted, giving him a slightly curious look. She asked, her voice firm yet inviting. Yes, Jacob stammered, suddenly aware of the weight of her gaze. Her eyes narrowed ever so slightly as if assessing him. Marketing coordinator, he replied, the words rushing out as he tried to sound polished. Interesting, she said, nodding thoughtfully, and just like that, she walked by him. But that brief moment felt electric, a spark of light in an otherwise dim hallway. 2 hours passed and the lobby thinned out. Only a couple of people remained. Jacob fidgeted, trying not to obsess over the idea that moments were passing him by. But then the elevator dinged once more. His heart skipped, footsteps echoed as the doors slid open again. This time there were fewer executives, but they carried an air of authority. Jacob's eyes followed them as they whispered excitedly among themselves. When one of them finally stepped to the side, Jacob noticed a paper slid into the glass panel beside the elevator controls. He squinted, his breath catching in his throat as he approached. There it was, the executive access list, names neatly typed and organized. He couldn't help himself, it was like a magnet pulling him closer. As he got nearer, he scanned the names one by one, his heart racing. He was looking for one specific name, his. He lined in, desperate, anxiety coursing through him. What if it wasn't there? What if he had come all this way only to find he was no one? His eyes darted down the list, skimming over the well-known names of successful men and women, the industry elites. The anticipation became almost unbearable. He held his breath, feeling the weight of their achievements versus his own strivings, and then there it was, a glimmer of his own name. It was nestled between 2 prominent figures, almost unreal for a moment. He pulled back, a powerful rush hitting him as he stepped back in disbelief. He read it again, his pulse hammering in his ears. Jacob Miller. His heart soared, flooding him with a sense of validation he had been yearning for. Breathing suddenly felt easier, relief washing over him like summer rain. It was quickly followed by a wave of fear. Now came the daunting part. What if he failed? What if this was all just a mirage? The pressure settled back on his shoulders, heavier than before. Suddenly he heard a voice beside him. It It was the tall woman from earlier. She moved closer and now looked genuinely pleased, her expression warming. "Yes, I am," Jacob responded, still processing the reality of it, the sheer gravity of what lay ahead. "Good," she said, her smile unwavering. "You'll do well. Just remember, every great executive started somewhere." Her words turned the silence inside him into a reminder that this wasn't just his moment, it was a part of a greater journey. "Thank you," Jacob found himself saying, a wave of gratitude spilling out. She nodded in acknowledgement. Then with a wink, she stepped toward the doors as they opened. With a final look back, she continued, "Good luck, Jacob." He stood frozen, that spark igniting a fire inside him. With every step as the elevator doors closed behind her, he felt the layers of doubt peeling away. As the minutes flowed, the weight shifted. The waiting had transformed into readiness. Jacob gathered his thoughts and stood tall. No more hesitation, no more self-doubt. When his time came, he stepped into that elevator. The smooth doors closed around him, and as the numbers lit up, he felt a surge of excitement. The rising tension transformed into courage, each floor taking him closer to the executive floor, to where his dreams lived. He hadn't realized how long he had waited or how silent he had been, but here he was, ready to break that silence and make his mark. The elevator jolted to a stop on the executive floor, and as the doors opened, Jacob felt the soft rush of the air, the sound of success surrounding him. In that moment, he understood. Sometimes when you wait in silence, it's not just about stalled moments. Sometimes it's the calm before your own storm of greatness. A soft ding echoed through the lobby as the elevator doors slid open. Jacob stood just a few feet away, the rhythmic pulse of his heartbeat drowning out the ambient noise around him. The executive floor loomed above, a world he had only glimpsed in his mind's eye. But right now, in this moment of infinite possibility, Jacob was rooted to the spot, feeling like an outsider peering through a glass wall. Would he be seen? Would he earn his place among the elite? Silence wrapped around him like a heavy fog. He watched the executives glide past, their tailored suits whispering stories of power and success. They moved with a confidence he envied, their smiles sharp and intentional, like arrows aimed straight at triumph. Jacob's stomach churned with both excitement and dread. Just yesterday, he had envisioned this moment in his sleep, stepping onto that elevator, riding up to achieve his dreams, to shine in the world of marketing he had dreamed of since his college days. And yet today, as he stood in the crowded lobby, that dream felt distant, like a mirage shimmering just beyond his reach. He thought back to the countless hours he spent preparing for this very moment. Night after night, he practiced his pitch until every word felt ingrained in his memory. Mock interviews with friends, nervously paced footsteps alone in his apartment, all leading to the single threshold he dared to cross. The elevator doors had closed just moments before his heart dropped. A group of executives with cold expressions had whisked past him, ignoring his presence as if he were invisible. It shattered his confidence, leaving him questioning if he truly belonged here. In moments like this, the mind can play tricks. It twists hope into doubt with whispers that echo louder than any applause. Jacob recalled an article he read about imposter syndrome, where high achievers often felt like frauds, the sense that they didn't deserve to be where they were. Right here, right now, standing in the shadow of their success, Jacob felt that exact weight pulling at his resolve. After the lingering disappointment, time dragged on like an unwanted guest. The receptionist lifted her head only long enough to nod at newcomers, busy with paperwork and phone calls. It felt as if everyone was moving, but Jacob stood frozen, wondering if all of this would lead to something or if he was simply another face lost in the crowd. But just when he thought about turning back, the elevator dinged again. A tall woman stepped out, her commanding aura cutting through the air like a knife. Her heels clicked sharply against the floor as she surveyed her surroundings, confidence radiating from her every movement. Jacob held his breath. There she was, Lei, the person he had been waiting to meet. A senior executive in the marketing department, Lee had made her mark known in the industry. Every article he read about dynamic leaders seemed to feature her name. To Jacob, she was a beacon, someone who seemed so far beyond where he felt he stood. As if she sensed him, Lee turned her gaze in his direction, her eyes locking onto his. In that instant, the lobby melted away, and all that existed was the electricity between them. A few conversations around him muted into whispers, fading into the background. She asked, her voice slicing through the silence, strong and warm. It took Jacob a moment to respond. "Yes," he stammered, feeling small yet hopeful. She stepped closer, genuinely interested. "Marketing coordinator," he replied, trying to level his voice, trying to sound as bold as she seemed. She nodded thoughtfully, a flicker of acknowledgement glimmering in her gaze. "You've got this," Lee encouraged. With that, Lee moved on, blending back into the rhythm of the office world, leaving Jacob feeling both empowered and perplexed. The weight of her words echoed in his mind. What did she mean by "why you're here"? Was it simply to land a job, or was it something deeper, something more profound? Perhaps it was about courage, about stepping into the light when the urge to retreat loomed larger. As the day wore on, Jacob found himself caught in a cycle of waiting. His mind raced with possibilities and doubts. He looked back to Lee's brief visit as if it were a beacon, a flash of light among the shadows crowding his thoughts. Each time the elevator doors opened, he felt his heart skip a beat, hoping it would be him next. But time continued to slip away as others came and went, laughter and conversations weaving through the air. Jacob's thoughts drifted as he watched the scene unfold around him. It struck him how the world ran like a well-oiled machine, like a train with an unyielding destination. Everyone had a purpose, a role to be seen, to contribute, and often he thought they had to wait in silence too to find their moment. He glanced back at the list of names taped beside the elevator, a formal scroll of those who had access to this branch of the empire. It was a reminder that those who'd waited just beyond the lobby had earned their place. Moments turned into hours, with each passing minute thickening the tension weighing on Jacob's shoulders. The desire to step into the executive world felt palpable, intoxicating, and yet so far away as he watched others take the journey he wanted so badly. Then came the moment that shattered the monotony. The elevator doors pinged yet again, this time releasing a group of executives whose laughter filled the air like music. Jacob's heart raced as he took a step closer to the list, desperate for any sign that he could be part of that world. As fate would have it, one of the executives, a stout man with a hefty briefcase, casually nudged the paper as he brushed past. The list ruffled and Jacob's breath caught in his throat as his name came into focus. Jacob Miller, he read, his voice a mere whisper in the crowded lobby. There it was, printed neatly between names he recognized and respected. A surge of pride washed over him. His name was there, placed among those who thrived in this world of ambition and dreams. It felt surreal, like a scene from a movie where the hero embarks on the impossible journey. In that moment, waiting transformed into possibility. No more silence, he was visible. Jacob stood rooted, the air thick with anticipation. But mixed with the joy was another feeling, fear. What if this was just a brief sparkle before darkness? What if the interview went ungracefully? Perhaps Lee's fleeting words were just a comfort, words meant for everyone, not just him. As if reading his thoughts, the elevator doors opened again, this time revealing Lee once more. She stepped out, making eye contact with Jacob. An understanding passed between them, one that ignited his courage and suppressed the doubts swirling in his mind. The atmosphere shifted around him. He could feel the tension of waiting transform into readiness. When the time came, he would step into that elevator with a purpose. He was more than just a face among the crowd. He had a story to tell. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, a receptionist glanced up and called his name. Time slowed and Jacob felt a surge of adrenaline coursing through him. He took a deep breath, settling the spattering butterflies in his stomach. He walked toward the elevator, feeling every gaze on him. No longer was he the silent observer, he was stepping into his destiny. As he pressed the button, the door slid shut behind him. The ascent felt like a ritual, each floor passing in soft whispers. Just below the surface, tension and anticipation mingled, a cocktail of fear and excitement. With every passing second, his mind flooded with the things he wanted to say, the ideas he wanted to share. When the doors opened onto the executive floor, a rush of sound enveloped him. He stepped into a brightly lit, bustling world filled with people who appeared just as ambitious, just as focused as he'd hoped. This was where he belonged. With courage swelling in his chest, Jacob straightened his tie, taking a decisive step forward. Today marked the bridge between waiting in silence and claiming his space in the universe. After a journey defined by quiet anticipation, he dared to be seen, ready to make his mark, and that was just the beginning. He stood there, heart pounding, sweat trickling down his back. Jacob peered at his reflection in the glass wall. The sleek lobby of Wexford Enterprises buzzed around him, a symphony of sharp suits and clipped conversations. But Jacob felt like an uninvited guest at a lavish party, standing on the outskirts while everyone else danced. He waited, his palms clammy against the neatly folded resume in his hand, the paper crinkling under the pressure. Each passing minute weighed heavier, the din of executive excitement above him becoming almost unbearable. Just a few feet away, the elegant elevator door slid open and closed, ushering in confident leaders who laughed and strategized without a second thought. This wasn't just any day. This was the day Jacob had been yearning for, the culmination of countless late nights and early mornings. He had prepared meticulously for the marketing coordinator position, diving deep into research, rehearsing answers until they flowed like water. Yet here he stood, paralyzed by the very opportunity he had chased so fervently. Once again, he glanced at the rotating list beside the elevator, the executive access list. His gaze flitted over the names seasoned professionals, leaders in their fields, stars in an unforgiving arena. He felt dwarfed by the distance that stretched between him and those names. What if he wasn't good enough? What if he stepped into that elevator only to find himself swimming in a sea of talent and experience that left him gasping for air? The self-doubt crept in, fueled by every rejection letter he had ever received, every time he felt invisible in a crowded room. But as he wrestled with those thoughts, a sudden ding interrupted his spiral. The elevator doors slid open, and a group of executives stepped out, their laughter bursting forth like champagne bubbles. Among them was Lee Hastings, the VP of Marketing. She exuded confidence, her presence filling the lobby effortlessly. For a moment, Jacob was captivated. He remembered how a single video of her at a marketing conference had ignited his passion, her words inspiring him to carve a path of his own in the industry. And here she was, just a few feet away. Would she notice him? Would she remember that he once sent her an email seeking advice? But Lee didn't seem to see him. Her focus remained locked on her colleagues, who were too engrossed in conversation to notice the young man waiting in the wings. Jacob's heart sank. He destined to remain a shadow in the bright world of marketing, never to be recognized. Time ticked by as he fought against the weight of hesitation. But he knew the interview was not just about landing a job, it was about proving to himself that he belonged, that he was worth this opportunity. And somewhere deep down, he believed that if he could just ride that elevator up, everything would shift. He pressed his lips together, trying to summon resolve. He glanced again at the list, rooted in ambition. Would his name ever grace that paper? Would he eventually belong alongside these triumphant figures? The mere thought ignited a surge of determination in him. He had come this far, he couldn't turn back now. Just then, the elevator dinged again and the doors glided open. This time it was even busier than before, a wall of suits aimed directly at Jacob. They didn't see him. They walked past like he was a fixture of the room rather than a person with dreams. But before he could retreat back into silence, Lee turned her gaze toward him, her eyes piercing through the ocean of executives. She asked, her voice cutting through the faint hum. Jacob felt his heart race. "Yes, I am," he replied, trying to keep the tremor from his voice. She smiled, a genuine warmth radiating from her. "I've been there, just remember you have something valuable to offer." As she walked away, her words hung in the air, each syllable resonating within him. Jacob held that moment close, like a lifeline cast out to sea. Could it really be that simple? Just acknowledge his worth and go for it. For a fleeting moment, he felt buoyed, as if he could step onto that elevator and rise toward his destiny. But the moment faded into uncertainty as he stood watching the doors close behind her. More time passed, each second feeling like an eternity, and Jacob wondered if he had lost his moment entirely. Perhaps this was just a dream that wouldn't come true, a final act of bravado before the curtain fell and he slipped back into the obscurity that had once felt so comfortable. It was a tattoo of anxiety lodged deep in his consciousness, but just as he thought he might leave, the elevator doors opened again. This time he could see a small group of new employees being led toward the executive elevators, their excited chatter breaking through his thoughts. He hesitated for a moment, but as they moved past him, one young woman turned. Jacob nodded slowly. She smiled knowingly. "You'll do great." Her enthusiasm sparked something inside him, reigniting the fire that had dimmed in the waiting. He took a deep breath and refocused, remembering the preparation, the passion that had brought him here in the first place. Suddenly, the realization struck him. Waiting was a part of this journey. Everyone had a moment of silence before they made their mark. Everyone who had ever reached their goal had once stood where he stood now. When the doors opened once more, Jacob felt an undeniable shift. It was now or never. He stepped closer, his heart racing, and without thinking about it too much, he walked onto the elevator. The door slid shut behind him, sealing him within the polished walls. As the elevator lurched upward, an exhilarating mix of fear and hope coursed through him. Each floor ticked away beneath him, offering a glimpse of what lay ahead. He could already imagine what it would feel like to walk into that room and share his ideas. The vision fueled him, turning every ounce of doubt into determination. But as the elevator reached the executive level, his heart thudded against his ribs like a drum. What if he stumbled? What if they saw the nerves bubbling just below his surface? He felt like a diver standing at the edge of a pool, staring into the depths. Then something shifted inside him. He remembered Lee's words, her encouragement wrapped in sincerity. He wasn't just here to fill a seat, he was here to make an impact. He had to believe in himself. They wouldn't reach for mediocrity, they sought fresh, innovative ideas. No one achieved greatness by remaining distant. The elevator doors opened and he stepped out into the vibrant world he had anticipated. Instantaneously, the room was filled with energy. Discussions whirled around him like a whirlwind, a mix of animated voices and laughter. He could see the marketing team nestled at the long conference table, each member brimming with enthusiasm. Jacob took a moment to absorb the scene. This was it, the setting for his dreams. Heart racing with possibility, he moved forward, pushing through the wall of fear that threatened to hold him back. A familiar voice broke through the noise, and it was Lee. She was standing at the head of the table, looking at him with that same warmth that had sparked something inside him earlier. "Good to see you." A tide of surprise washed over him as he stepped toward them, the weight of silence lifting as he felt himself welcomed into their world. Jacob took a breath, centering himself. All the waiting had led to this moment. He was no longer a spectator, he was a participant, ready to share his vision, his ambitions, and his ideas. This is about connection, he reminded himself as he took his seat, scanning the room. Each face held its own story, layered by their journeys and struggles, just like his. Lee smiled again, and Jacob felt a rush of gratitude. This was a new chapter, the beginning of something extraordinary. The anticipation only built as they started discussing the challenges the marketing team faced, challenges he could see himself tackling head-on. And there it was, that surge of hope transforming into raw energy. He began to speak, words flowing freely, weaving his ideas into the fabric of the conversation, lighting up faces around him with every point he made. Each sentence built upon the last, each thought a stepping stone toward a shared goal. As the meeting unfolded, Jacob let himself be seen, let himself take ownership of the space. The feeling of waiting in silence melted away, replaced by a courageous conviction. His voice rang out, clear and confident, and for the first time, Jacob felt he was exactly where he was meant to be. Minutes turned to what felt like hours, yet still, he couldn't shake the euphoric momentum. The energy shifted in that conference room. He could feel it reverberating off the walls. The team resonated with his passion, and he knew he had found a rhythm that felt impossible to suppress. When the meeting ended, Lee approached him, her face alight with approval. "You were fantastic," she said, genuine admiration shining in her eyes. Jacob felt a rush of joy. All the waiting had led to triumph, to validation. He had waited, of course, but in that silence he had found strength, resilience, and an unwavering belief in himself. The elevator doors might be where the waiting began, but they had also been the gateway to opportunity. In stepping into that world, he had discovered his voice, his purpose, and his place among the best in the business. No more silence, he thought, relishing the victory of the moment. Jacob had finally learned to embrace the wait, understanding that sometimes the silence is just the calm before the storm of greatness. Every journey has its beginning, and sometimes it takes time to learn that every moment of waiting is an invitation to grow. Today, Jacob had taken the leap, stepping away from the shadows and into the light. His name may have seemed just ink on a list earlier, but now it became synonymous with ambition and courage. He had arrived, and the story was only just beginning. He stood frozen, heart racing, as the elevator doors slid shut behind him. The air inside was thick with possibility. Each floor ticked away like a countdown echoing in his mind. Jacob clenched his fist around his resume, slick with sweat. In just moments, he would either step into the world he had long dreamed of or return to the mundane silence of uncertainty. As the elevator ascended, he glanced at the small digital display, his nerves buzzing like a live wire. 4 floors to go, the numbers blinked back at him in stark black and white, a sharp contrast to the swirling thoughts racing in his head. Every second felt like an hour. He had imagined this moment countless times, rehearsed what he would say, crafted the perfect pitch. But now, facing the reality, he felt like a boy standing in front of a colossal mountain, unsure if he had the strength to climb. The echo of faux conversations from below buzzed in the background. Each ding of the elevator reminded him of the other candidates, young professionals, each radiant and full of ambition. They all loomed larger than life in his mind, while he felt small, tethered by self-doubt. He remembered the night he had decided to apply for the position of marketing coordinator. Something inside him cracked open, a flicker of hope igniting in the shadows. It felt like destiny, a whisper urging him to reach for something greater. But what if that was just a naive dream? Just as he wrestled with his thoughts, the elevator jerked to a stop. The moment was surreal. The doors opened with a smooth glide, revealing the bustling world of Wexford Enterprises. A kaleidoscope of ambition, power, and sharp suits awaited him. Freshly brewed coffee wafted in the air, and laughter bubbled from the conference room nearby. Jacob stepped out, every instinct screaming for him to turn back, to retreat to the safety of the lobby. But he couldn't back down, not now. He had waited too long, invested too much of himself in this dream. He stepped into the bright, polished space, enveloped by an energy that was both intoxicating and daunting. The receptionist looked up, her smile wide and welcoming, as if she could sense the storm of emotions rolling inside him. "Hello, you must be here for the interview," she said, her tone cheerful yet professional. Jacob took a breath, grounding himself. "Yes, I'm Jacob Miller. Great, they're ready for you. Just head through those doors." She gestured toward a set of glass double doors that seemed to glow, beckoning him forward. Jacob's heart pounded in his chest as he walked toward the doors. Behind them awaited a team of seasoned professionals, a panel that would determine whether he had what it takes to join their ranks. Each step felt heavier than the last. Was he truly ready for this moment? Pushed through the doors, he thought, the mantra echoing in his mind, "You belong here." As he stepped through, the warmth of the room enveloped him. A long conference table stretched before him, surrounded by a dynamic group of faces, each one filled with curiosity, scrutiny, or a mixture of both. Lee Hastings, the VP of Marketing, sat at the head of the table, her presence commanding the room with an energy that was hard to ignore. "Jacob," she said, a smile breaking on her face as her eyes met his. "Welcome." The warmth in her voice provided a small shield against his anxiety. "Thank you for having me," he replied, taking a seat at the table, each eye upon him, each breath feeling like an open window into his soul. The interview began, and to Jacob's amazement, the nerves that had threatened to overwhelm him began to calm. The questions flowed, and surprisingly, he found his voice. "I believe in the power of storytelling in marketing," he said, sharing his passion. As he spoke, his passion blossomed, igniting a fire inside him. He looked around the room and the executives leaned in, nodding, their interest peaked. It felt like the walls had come alive with possibility, each moment unraveling a thread that connected him to their world. But then, a wave of doubt crashed over him. Would they see him as just another candidate in a sea of talent? He remembered the countless applications he had submitted, the years of waiting for a door to open. The thought of returning to that cycle of being ignored again clenched his chest. Lee asked, her voice steady. It was a question he had prepared for but now felt daunting. I believe I bring a fresh perspective, he replied carefully. I approach marketing through a lens of authenticity. For a moment the room was silent, the executives exchanged glances, and Jacob's heart raced anew. Had he said too much? Was he stepping over the line? Then the atmosphere shifted. Lee leaned forward, her eyes sparkling. That's a bold stance. Jacob felt a wave of adrenaline surge as he dove deeper into his ideas, the conversation becoming a dance rather than a battle. They delved into strategies, dissecting market trends, consumer behavior, and innovative approaches. The dialogue flowed like a river, each insight sparking new ideas, new possibilities. But just as he felt the thrill of connection growing, a fleeting anxiety tugged at him. He couldn't shake the haunting feeling of inadequacy. In that moment, he remembered the executive access list hanging in the lobby, all those names he had seen. Each one a testament to someone who had earned their place, who had dared to step into the light. Would he ever be one of them? As the interview continued, his thoughts were a maelstrom, self-doubt mingled with a newfound sense of belonging. Would this be his moment of transformation, or just another closed door? As he articulated his vision for the future of the company, a fire ignited within him, propelling his words forward. Finally, after what felt like a lifetime, Lee smiled. You have a compelling vision, Jacob. Relief washed over him, but before he could fully process it, Lee continued, I want to take a closer look. Can we give you access to our executive elevator and share more about what we're building here? Access to the executive elevator. The words echoed in his mind like music. That simple phrase sent a jolt of exhilaration through him. The realization that they were interested in having him interested in his ideas was electrifying. Yes. I'd love to, he exclaimed, excitement bubbling over. As the formalities wrapped up, Jacob felt a mix of elation and disbelief. They had seen him, truly seen him, in a way that felt profound and life-changing. Hours later, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, bathing the office in a soft golden hue, Jacob stood in the lobby once more. The receptionist, her earlier cheer replaced with an impressed smile, waved him over. Congratulations, Jacob. You're on the executive access list, she announced, pointing to the paper taped on the wall. His breath caught in his throat, disbelief washing over him. He moved closer, his heart thudding in his chest, and there it was, his name, neatly printed under a list of esteemed executives. Jacob Miller. He felt a surge of triumph flood his system, the weight of weeks of waiting and uncertainty lifting like a veil. In that moment, he understood. This wasn't just a job offer, it was validation, affirmation of all the nights he had spent dreaming and working toward this exact moment. The silence he had endured had bred resilience, giving him the strength to push through the hesitation and doubt. The doors of the elevator towered before him, gleaming with potential. Jacob walked toward them with renewed confidence, each step echoing with a clarity he had never felt before. He'd waited, yes, but in that waiting he had transformed, finding strength in the silence, clarity in the chaos. As the elevator doors closed behind him, Jacob reflected on the path that had led him to this moment. He had been afraid, uncertain, questioning if he truly belonged. The waiting had felt endless, yet within it lay the seeds of his growth. The elevator lurched to life, ascending toward a future brimming with possibility. He didn't just read his name on that list, he found himself wrapped in a sense of belonging he had long craved. As the doors opened at the executive floor, he stepped out into a new reality, ready to share his vision, his passion, and his voice. The silence of waiting had transformed into the symphony of opportunity, and with it he found himself ready to embrace the challenge that lay ahead. He had made it not just to a job, but to the beginning of a vibrant journey. The dream was no longer just that, he was part of the narrative now, and he intended to write it boldly. He stood outside the gleaming glass door, feeling the electric energy of the bustling office behind him. Jacob clenched his resume tightly, his heart pounding against his chest. He could hear laughter drifting through the air, a reminder of what he wanted so desperately. Today was the day he had been waiting for, the day he would step into the world of Wexford Enterprises, the shining star of marketing firms. Yet here he was, frozen, trapped at the edge of that dream. If he had only known how much this moment would mean to him, he might have prepared differently. In the days leading up to this moment, anxiety had churned within him like a storm. He spent nights rehearsing answers, crafting ideas, and convincing himself that he belonged here. But now, standing in front of that door, the thought of stepping into the unknown left his hands tinged with sweat. Jacob took a deep breath, forcing himself to push the door open. The lobby was filled with people, a whirlwind of energy buzzing like a crowded subway. Executives in tailored suits moved about with purpose, their conversations sharp yet lively. The aroma of fresh coffee wafted through the air, a comforting scent that usually brought him solace but only heightened his nerves today. His eyes darted around the room, eagerly searching for anyone who might recognize the hopeful energy bubbling within him. But each second he stood there, the anxiety intensified, crushing his spirit under the weight of self-doubt. The whisper echoed in his mind. As he scanned the room, his gaze landed on a large digital display mounted near the entrance, the executive elevator access list. He had seen it before in photos online, the names of powerful leaders in sleek print, representing success, ambition, and everything he hoped to achieve. But now it sent a chill down his spine. What if his name never made it onto that list? Just then the elevator dinged. Jacob's heart skipped a beat. The doors opened, revealing a group of confident executives stepping out, all talking and laughing effortlessly. One of them caught his eye. Lee Hastings, the VP of Marketing, the woman he had long admired, herself a force of nature in the industry. She strode past him, her confidence radiating like a beacon. He couldn't help but feel dwarfed beside her, a mere shadow lurking in the background. He thought about how many times he had watched her on stage, how her words had inspired him to dare to reach for something more. But would she even glance in his direction? Jacob swallowed hard. The elevator doors slid closed behind the executives. That interaction, however brief, was a reminder of the mountain he had yet to climb. The air was thick with ambition, and he felt like an interloper in someone else's dream. But at that moment he realized he couldn't let fear win. He had fought too hard to arrive at this door. Somewhere hidden beneath the fear was an ember of determination waiting to spark into a flame. He took a step forward and then another. Came a voice from the reception desk. Jacob turned to see a middle-aged woman with a warm smile. "Yes," he managed to say, his voice barely above a whisper. She nodded, her smile widening. Wonderful. With renewed purpose, he made his way to the conference room, each step away from the lobby making him feel lighter. As he entered, he was greeted by a long table surrounded by eager faces ready to evaluate him. Among them was Leigh, her gaze piercing and curious. "Welcome, Jacob. We've been looking forward to this," she said, and his heart raced a little faster. The interview kicked off with a few standard questions. Jacob outlined his experience, speaking passionately about his previous projects. He recounted a time at his last job when he had successfully led a campaign that increased sales by 20%. The moment his words flowed, the tension in the room transformed into a wave of energy. He felt like a conductor, orchestrating interest and engagement, but doubt lingered at the edges of his mind. Was he truly winning them over? Then Leigh posed a question that made his heart drop. He hesitated, grappling with the weight of self-doubt. They had seen resumes just like his, a slew of candidates eager to break into the industry. What made him worthy? Taking a deep breath, he focused. "I believe in the power of authenticity," he said, his voice steadying. "I want to help brands connect with their audiences on a deeper level, foster real relationships." As Jacob spoke, his confidence began to grow, his initial hesitation fading. The room listened intently. Leigh leaned forward, intrigued. "Absolutely," Jacob replied, and sharing his ideas felt like breaking free from a cage. He discussed a campaign he had conceived during an internship, pouring his heart into the details. The executives nodded, impressed. There was no denying that the energy in the room began to shift dramatically. The conversation rolled on, with questions bouncing back and forth. They delved deeper into his strategies, assessing not just his ability to think outside the box, but to navigate the complexities of the marketing landscape. Jacob felt the fire igniting within him. But just when he felt he was really connecting, a flicker of fear returned. What if his ideas weren't enough? What if he left that room, sulking back to the silence of rejection? He had come so far, waited for this opportunity, yet still, he worried they would see him as just another imposter. Finally, after a particularly dynamic exchange, the interview wrapped up with Leigh smiling. "You've given us a lot to think about, Jacob." The warmth in her tone enveloped him like a hug. Surely that had to mean something. As he stood to leave, a small voice whispered in the back of his head, perhaps this wasn't just another missed chance. Once outside the conference room, Jacob took a moment to breathe. The lobby was just as lively as before, the hum of corporate life playing like an upbeat soundtrack. The weight of uncertainty began to lift as he replayed the interview in his mind. Could he dare to hope? As he wandered toward the glass doors, the elevator dinged again, and the "Up for the Challenge" sign flashed vibrant on the display. He couldn't shake the feeling that his name might soon join the illustrious names on the list. Jacob leaned closer to that list, hoping to find inspiration. Names of industry giants jumped out, pioneers and visionaries he had admired from afar. And then it hit him. Those people had once stood where he stood now, their dreams dancing just out of reach until they found the courage to leap. And then, as if the universe was answering his unspoken wish, the elevator doors opened, and out stepped a group of young professionals, exuding confidence and enthusiasm. One of them turned to Jacob and smiled. "Yes," Jacob said, his own nerves calming in the face of their vibrant energy. She said, her smile genuine, almost contagious. "Thank you," Jacob replied, feeling lighter. It was just a small exchange, but it sent another ripple through him, boosting his resolve. The afternoon unfolded like silk, each minute stretching and folding with possibility. The day turned to dusk, golden rays spilling through the glass facade, each beam illuminating his path, but with the fading light came a tinge of fear. The waiting was almost over, and soon the reality of the outcome would settle in. He made his way to the corner desk in the lobby. With a deep breath, he decided to face those fears, reminding himself of the light he felt during the interview. The crushing uncertainty began to shift, igniting a sense of anticipation. Perhaps he was more than just a dreamer, perhaps he belonged here amongst the stars. Just then, the receptionist called him back, her voice bright as the overhead lights. Jacob. He stepped forward, wary but intrigued. She exclaimed, pointing to the access list tacked to the wall. His heart raced as he turned toward the digital marquee, and there it was, his name, Jacob Miller, neatly printed and unmistakable. It glowed like a beacon of hope. The enormity of the moment washed over him in waves, drowning out the noise of the world around him. When he had first walked into Wexford Enterprises, he had felt lost, swallowed by the shadow of self-doubt. Yet here he was, his name standing proudly alongside the titans of the industry. He took a step back, the room spinning slightly around him. "Did you say?" he asked, his voice coming out in a breathy rush of disbelief. "Yes, you made the list." A whirlwind of emotions soared through Jacob. The remaining pieces of anxiety began to scatter like autumn leaves, and a joyous grin spread across his face. For the first time since he entered this space, he felt a sense of belonging, a realization that he had waited in silence, but now it was time to let his voice shine. The elevator doors shimmered before him, a portal to a new beginning. He had sought this access, longed for it, and now, as he stepped toward the elevator, he was prepared to take real action. He pressed the button, the doors sliding open with a gentle swoosh. For a moment he hesitated, glancing back at the lobby, the memories of doubt lingering like shadows. But this time they felt small, insignificant against the radiant light of his achievement. As the elevator doors closed, Jacob took a deep breath, feeling the shift within him. He was more than just a name, he was a part of something larger than himself. The journey was his now, and he was ready to carve his path, to let his ideas flow and reshape the world of marketing as he had always dreamed. The elevation surged upward, and with each passing floor, the weight of waiting turned into hope. No longer trapped in silence, Jacob was ready to express his vision, to make an impact. When the doors opened on the executive level, Jacob stepped out into an expanse filled with opportunity, the light bright and welcoming. He felt a surge of gratitude wash over him. He had waited, yes, but now he understood that every moment had been an invaluable step toward his destiny. Emboldened by this extraordinary journey, Jacob finally felt like he belonged. He stood frozen, heart racing, as the elevator doors slid shut behind him. The air inside was thick with possibility. Each floor ticked away like a countdown echoing in his mind. Jacob clenched his fist around his resume, slick with sweat. In just moments, he would either step into the world he had long dreamed of or return to the mundane silence of uncertainty. As the elevator ascended, he glanced at the small digital display, his nerves buzzing like a live wire. 4 floors to go, the numbers blinked back at him in stark black and white, a sharp contrast to the swirling thoughts racing in his head. Every second felt like an hour. He had imagined this moment countless times, rehearsed what he would say, crafted the perfect pitch. But now, facing the reality, he felt like a boy standing in front of a colossal mountain, unsure if he had the strength to climb. The echo of faux conversations from below buzzed in the background. Each ding of the elevator reminded him of the other candidates, young professionals, each radiant and full of ambition. They all loomed larger than life in his mind, while he felt small, tethered by self-doubt. He remembered the night he had decided to apply for the position of marketing coordinator. Something inside him cracked open, a flicker of hope igniting in the shadows. It felt like destiny, a whisper urging him to reach for something greater. But what if that was just a naive dream? Just as he wrestled with those thoughts, the elevator jerked to a stop. The moment was surreal. The doors opened with a smooth glide, revealing the bustling world of Wexford Enterprises. A kaleidoscope of ambition, power, and sharp suits awaited him. Freshly brewed coffee wafted in the air, a comforting scent that usually brought him solace but only heightened his nerves today. His eyes darted around the room, eagerly searching for anyone who might recognize the hopeful energy bubbling within him. But each second he stood there, the anxiety intensified, crushing his spirit under the weight of self-doubt. The whisper echoed in his mind. As he scanned the room, his gaze landed on a large digital display mounted near the entrance, the executive elevator access list. He had seen it before in photos online, the names of powerful leaders in sleek print, representing success, ambition, and everything he hoped to achieve. But now it sent a chill down his spine. What if his name never made it onto that list? Just then the elevator dinged. Jacob's heart skipped a beat. The doors opened, revealing a group of confident executives stepping out, all talking and laughing effortlessly. One of them caught his eye, Lee Hastings, the VP of marketing, the woman he had long admired, herself a force of nature in the industry. She strode past him, her confidence radiating like a beacon. He couldn't help but feel dwarfed beside her, a mere shadow lurking in the background. He He thought about how many times he had watched her on stage, how her words had inspired him to dare to reach for something more. But would she even glance in his direction? Jacob swallowed hard. The elevator doors slid closed behind the executives. That interaction, however brief, was a reminder of the mountain he had yet to climb. The air was thick with ambition, and he felt like an interloper in someone else's dream. But at that moment, he realized he couldn't let fear win. He had fought too hard to arrive at this door. Somewhere, hidden beneath the fear, was an ember of determination waiting to spark into a flame. He took a step forward, and then another. Came a voice from the reception desk. Jacob turned to see a middle-aged woman with a warm smile. "Yes," he managed to say, his voice barely above a whisper. She nodded, her smile widening. Wonderful. With renewed purpose, he made his way to the conference room, each step away from the lobby making him feel lighter. As he entered, he was greeted by a long table surrounded by eager faces ready to evaluate him. Among them was Lily, her gaze piercing and curious. "Welcome, Jacob. We've been looking forward to this," she said, and his heart raced a little faster. The interview kicked off with a few standard questions. Jacob outlined his experience, speaking passionately about his previous projects. He recounted a time at his last job when he had successfully led a campaign that increased sales by 20%. The moment his words flowed, the tension in the room transformed into a wave of energy. He felt like a conductor, orchestrating interest and engagement, but doubt lingered at the edges of his mind. Would they see him as just another candidate in a sea of talent? Then Lee posed a question that made his heart drop. He hesitated, grappling with the weight of self-doubt. They had seen resumes just like his, a slew of candidates eager to break into the industry. What made him worthy? Taking a deep breath, he focused. "I believe in the power of authenticity," he said, his voice steadying. "I want to help brands connect with their audiences on a deeper level, foster real relationships." As Jacob spoke, his confidence began to grow, his initial hesitation fading. The room listened intently. Lee leaned forward, intrigued. "Absolutely," Jacob replied, and sharing his ideas felt like breaking free from a cage. He discussed a campaign he had conceived during an internship, pouring his heart into the details. The executives nodded, impressed. There was no denying that the energy in the room began to shift dramatically. The conversation rolled on, with questions bouncing back and forth. They delved deeper into his strategies, assessing not just his ability to think outside the box, but to navigate the complexities of the marketing landscape. Jacob felt the fire igniting within him. But just when he felt he was really connecting, a flicker of fear returned. What if his ideas weren't enough? What if he left that room, sulking back to the silence of rejection? He had come so far, waited for this opportunity, yet still, he worried they would see him as just another imposter. Finally, after a particularly dynamic exchange, the interview wrapped up with Lee smiling. "You've given us a lot to think about, Jacob." The warmth in her tone enveloped him like a hug. Surely that had to mean something. As he stood to leave, a small voice whispered in the back of his head, perhaps this wasn't just another missed chance. Once outside the conference room, Jacob took a moment to breathe. The lobby was just as lively as before, the hum of corporate life playing like an upbeat soundtrack. The weight of uncertainty began to lift as he replayed the interview in his mind. Could he dare to hope? As he wandered toward the glass doors, the elevator dinged again, and the "Up for the Challenge" sign flashed vibrant on the display. He couldn't shake the feeling that his name might soon join the illustrious names on the list. Jacob leaned closer to that list, hoping to find inspiration. Names of industry giants jumped out, pioneers and visionaries he had admired from afar, and then it hit him. Those people had once stood where he stood now, their dreams dancing just out of reach until they found the courage to leap. And then, as if the universe was answering his unspoken wish, the elevator doors opened, and out stepped a group of young professionals, exuding confidence and enthusiasm. One of them turned to Jacob and smiled. "Yes," Jacob said, his own nerves calming in the face of their vibrant energy. She said, her smile genuine, almost contagious. "Thank you," Jacob replied, feeling lighter. It was just a small exchange, but it sent another ripple through him, boosting his resolve. The afternoon unfolded like silk, each minute stretching and folding with possibility. The day turned to dusk, golden rays spilling through the glass facade, each beam illuminating his path. But with the fading light came a tinge of fear. The waiting was almost over, and soon the reality of the outcome would settle in. He made his way to the corner desk in the lobby. With a deep breath, he decided to face those fears, reminding himself of the light he felt during the interview. The crushing uncertainty began to shift, igniting a sense of anticipation. Perhaps he was more than just a dreamer. Perhaps he belonged here amongst the stars. Just then, the receptionist called him back, her voice bright as the overhead lights. "Jacob," he stepped forward, wary but intrigued. She exclaimed, pointing to the access list tacked to the wall. His heart raced as he turned toward the digital marquee. And there it was, his name, Jacob Miller, neatly printed and unmistakable. It glowed like a beacon of hope. The enormity of the moment washed over him in waves, drowning out the noise of the world around him. When he had first walked into Wexford Enterprises, he had felt lost, swallowed by the shadow of self-doubt. Yet here he was, his name standing proudly alongside the titans of the industry. He took a step back, the room spinning slightly around him. "Did you say?" he asked, his voice coming out in a breathy rush of disbelief. "Yes, you made the list." A whirlwind of emotions soared through Jacob. The remaining pieces of anxiety began to scatter like autumn leaves, and a joyous grin spread across his face. For the first time since he entered this space, he felt a sense of belonging, a realization that he had waited in silence, but now it was time to let his voice shine. The elevator doors shimmered before him, a portal to a new beginning. He had sought this access, longed for it, and now, as he stepped toward the elevator, he was prepared to take real action. He pressed the button, the doors sliding open with a gentle swoosh. For a moment he hesitated, glancing back at the lobby, the memories of doubt lingering like shadows. But this time they felt small, insignificant against the radiant light of his achievement. As the elevator doors closed, Jacob took a deep breath, feeling the shift within him. He was more than just a name, he was a part of something larger than himself. The journey was his now, and he was ready to carve his path, to let his ideas flow and reshape the world of marketing as he had always dreamed. The elevation surged upward, and with each passing floor, the weight of waiting turned into hope. No longer trapped in silence, Jacob was ready to express his vision, to make an impact. When the doors opened on the executive level, Jacob stepped out into an expanse filled with opportunity, the light bright and welcoming. Felt a surge of gratitude wash over him. He had waited, yes, but now he understood that every moment had been an invaluable step toward his destiny. Emboldened by this extraordinary journey, Jacob finally felt like he belonged, and in his heart he knew this was just the beginning. He stood outside the sleek glass doors of Wexford Enterprises, the world inside buzzing with energy. Jacob felt a mix of excitement and dread as he held his resume tightly, the edges crinkling in his grasp. Today was a big day, the day he had waited for, his moment to finally step into the corporate world he had dreamed of since college. Yet at this very moment his heart fluttered with anxiety. The lobby was alive with laughter and lively conversations, the kind that filled the space with an infectious energy. But Jacob felt like a ghost, watching everyone else thrive. He took a deep breath, attempting to steady himself as he fought against the tide of self-doubt that rushed in. He had worked so hard, prepared endlessly, but standing here made him question everything. He silently wondered as he watched a well-dressed executive stroll past, a confident grin plastered on his face. With every confident stride, Jacob felt smaller, almost invisible. As he scanned the lobby, those familiar thoughts crept back, taunting him. What if he wasn't meant for this world? What if he was just chasing a dream that didn't belong to him? Just then the elevator dinged, shattering his fleeting thoughts and sending a fresh wave of hope through him. The doors opened to reveal a group of executives stepping out, their laughter trailing behind them like a warm breeze. Among them was Lee Hastings, the VP of Marketing, someone he had idolized through countless articles and videos. She exuded an air of authority, her smile radiant and contagious. He had seen her on stage, captivating audiences with her charm and confidence. But now, in this unforgiving environment, he felt overwhelmed by her presence, like a wilted flower in the midst of a vibrant garden. "Focus on the interview," he whispered to himself, trying to shake off the feeling of inadequacy. He was here for a reason. He had fought hard for this opportunity, poured his heart and soul into preparing, and he wouldn't walk away empty-handed. Jacob took a step forward, determined to claim his place in the world he admired so much. He approached the reception desk, where a friendly-looking woman smiled up at him. "Good morning," she asked, her voice warm and inviting. "Yes," Jacob replied, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "Wonderful, just through those doors," she said, gesturing toward a set of polished glass doors leading into the conference room. With renewed determination, Jacob made his way to the doors. As he entered the conference room, he was greeted by a long table surrounded by eager faces, each one belonging to someone who had already made their mark. They looked up expectantly as he walked in, and he felt the weight of their stares, a mix of curiosity and judgment. Lee greeted him. His heart raced as he took a seat at the table. This was the moment he had been waiting for, yet the intense scrutiny from the panel left him feeling vulnerable. He took a deep breath, letting it fill his lungs before exhaling slowly. This was it. The interview began, and the questions came quickly. He spoke about his experience, telling stories of projects he had worked on, campaigns he had executed. Jacob felt his passion bubbling to the surface as he highlighted his skills and insights, especially during a successful internship where he had managed a project that led to a significant increase in engagement. "I believe in the power of storytelling," he said, looking around the room. For a moment, he saw interest flicker in their eyes, a spark that encouraged him to continue. But doubts continued to flash through his mind like a flickering light. Would they see him as just another candidate, or could he really stand out among so much talent? Then Lee leaned forward, her expression serious yet intrigued. His heart raced again. That was the million-dollar question. Taking a moment to steady his breathing, Jacob reflected on his journey. He thought about the challenges he had faced, the obstacles he had overcome, and in that moment he found his voice. "I believe my ability to connect genuinely with people sets me apart." As he spoke, Jacob became more animated, embodying the passion he felt for the industry. He shared examples of times he had gone above and beyond to connect with audiences, to truly understand what they wanted. With each word, he could see the panel's interest grow, and for the first time, he felt like he was being heard. But just as he started to feel comfortable, a flicker of fear returned. What if he stumbled? What if he left that room empty-handed, another candidate who couldn't find his way? The pressure wrapped around him like a vice. He pushed those thoughts aside. No more hiding, no more waiting. If he was going to claim this opportunity, he had to leap into the unknown. He focused on Lee's gaze, the warmth in her eyes igniting a fleeting flame of hope. Another executive asked, interrupting his thoughts. This was it. Jacob remembered the last-minute campaign launch during his internship. He recalled scrambling with his team when they realized their original plans had fallen through just days before the deadline. The pressure had built on him like a weight he had never felt before, yet it forced him to break out of his shell. We had to come up with a completely new angle, he began, his voice steady. So we held a brainstorming session incorporating everyone's ideas, and I led a push to highlight user-generated content. As he spoke, the energy in the room shifted. The executives exchanged glances, nodding appreciatively. The connection with his audience had become palpable, his passion contagious. He didn't just recount a story, he brought them into his world. The conversation flowed, questions flying back and forth, the panel genuinely engaged. Each question seemed to propel him deeper into the moment, pulling him from the shadows of self-doubt to a place where he could finally shine. But as the discussion continued, fear reappeared in flashes. Was this real? Could he really be on the verge of achieving his dreams? And then it happened. After what felt like eons of questions and discussions, Lee smiled and leaned back in her chair. You've given us a lot to think about, Jacob. Relief flooded through him and he stood, feeling buoyed. Was this it? Could he dare to hope? Once he left the room, he took a deep breath, allowing the weight of anxiety to slip away. The lobby was bustling with life, and this time, Jacob felt a sense of empowerment wash over him. He thought back to the conversation he had just had, replaying the moments when he felt like he truly connected with the panel. Could it be that they were interested in him? The waiting began again, though this time it felt different. He wandered through the lobby, catching glimpses of the names on the executive elevator access list. Each name was a story, a journey, and he wondered, where would his name fit into that tapestry? Just then the elevator doors opened, and out stepped a trio of young professionals, laughing and chatting amongst themselves. One of them turned to Jacob and smiled. Yes, he replied, feeling the camaraderie lift his spirits. She exclaimed, beaming encouragement. Her confidence bled into him, filling him with a sense of possibility. After some time, the day began to dim, the sun set against the skyline outside the building. He felt the weight of anticipation grow heavier as he wrestled with lingering doubts. The moment of truth was closing in. The executive panel would consider him, and for all his hard work, he couldn't shake the thoughts of uncertainty that nagged at him. Just then, the receptionist called him back. Jacob, pushing past the cascade of thoughts, he stepped toward her desk, adrenaline coursing through him. She announced, her eyes twinkling. His heart raced as he turned toward the list displayed on the monitor. And there it was, his name, Jacob Miller, positioned among the who's who of the industry, right next to the names he had once only read about. In that moment, the gravity of it all washed over him like a wave, threatening to sweep him off his feet. My name, he asked, disbelief coloring his words. Yes, she replied, her excitement palpable. The whirlwind of emotions cascaded through him, a glorious mix of joy and relief. The waiting had transformed into validation. He had not just hoped, he had proven himself, and now his name stood proud among those who had carved their legacies. The elevator doors, once a barrier, now shimmered like a brilliant opening into a world he had long envisioned. He had waited in silence, feeling invisible, lost in a sea of ambition. But now the opportunity was there, glowing before him. He stepped toward the elevator, heart thundering in his chest. As he pressed the button and felt the doors slide shut behind him, a profound shift took place within him. This was no longer a solitary journey filled with uncertainty. He was part of something bigger. As the elevator ascended, each passing floor carried him closer to his new reality. No longer was he just Jacob, the hopeful outsider. He was Jacob Miller, ready to take his place in the vibrant world of marketing. When the doors opened on the executive floor, he stepped out into a landscape filled with endless possibilities, confidence coursing through his veins. The journey wasn't over, but it had taken a significant turn. He had waited, yes, but now he felt ready to embrace the future that beckoned him forward. And as he walked forward, he understood that waiting in silence had been a necessary part of his story. It had shaped him, prepared him, and now he was ready to make his mark. He stood at the entrance, staring up at the towering glass facade of Wexford Enterprises. The reflections glimmered against the evening sun, and yet within him churned a storm of uncertainty. Just moments ago, he had felt nothing but fiery determination, his heart racing with excitement. But now, the weight of reality settled on his shoulders like a heavy cloak. Jacob Miller was about to step into the world he had dreamed of for years, but as he approached the revolving doors, doubt crept in. What if he didn't belong? What if they saw him as just another candidate in a sea of exceptional talent? Taking a deep breath, he pushed through the door and entered the lobby, an expansive space filled with the buzz of life. Executives swirled around him, their conversations a blend of laughter and sharp business discussions. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafted through the air, but even that warm scent couldn't calm his frayed nerves. He scanned the room, every face a reminder of the fierce competition he was up against. In that moment, he felt like a shadow on the wall, an unwanted guest at a vibrant party. As he gripped his resume tighter, he caught sight of the digital access list board mounted near the elevator, the executive elevator access list. Those names were like stars in the sky, guiding lights that led the way in his industry. Jacob imagined his name on that list, how it might feel to see it printed beside industry titans, people who had worked tirelessly to earn their place in each other's stories. But doubt gnawed at him. What right did he have to dream that big, to want to share space with such luminaries? He pushed the thoughts aside. Today was about showing them who he was. He didn't just want to be a name on a piece of paper, he wanted to contribute something unique to help shape the next big campaign. Just then, the elevator doors opened, and a group of confident executives stepped out, their voices blending into a confident chorus. Among them was Lee Hastings, the VP of Marketing. She was a powerhouse, a figure he had admired from a distance for so long. As she approached, Jacob's heart raced. This was the moment where they might share a glance, and he could finally show her that he was more than just an aspiring marketer. But just as she brushed past him, immersed in conversation with her colleagues, that fleeting opportunity vanished, leaving him feeling small and forgotten. Though the laughter and chatter continued around him, Jacob felt increasingly isolated. He leaned against the cold marble wall, fighting the urge to retreat. This was a test, he reminded himself. His moment to prove that he belonged. He noticed a few candidates lingering nearby, their fingers tapping nervously against their resumes, eyes flicking between the doors and the list. Jacob realized he wasn't alone in this sea of jitters. Summoning his courage, he pushed off the wall and headed toward the receptionist. "Excuse me," he said, barely above a whisper. She replied, her smile warm and genuine. "I'm Jacob Miller, and I'm here for the marketing coordinator interview," he said, trying to steady his voice. Right just through those doors, the words hung in the air like a lifeline, drawing him toward the waiting room. Each step felt heavy, a reminder of how hard he had fought for this opportunity. The moment the door swung open, he saw the conference room filled with faces, bright-eyed people who had already carved their paths in the industry. Lee said, her eyes shining. He took a deep breath and stepped forward, ready to embrace whatever was coming next. This was the moment he had prepared for, where he would finally prove himself. The interview began with introductions, and Jacob shared snippets of his experience. He talked about the internships, school projects, and late nights spent honing his craft. But as the conversation deepened, the doubt resurfaced. This was the first time he would be judged by the very people he had looked up to. His heart raced, a visceral reminder of the stakes. He had rehearsed this question countless times, but the words felt trapped in his throat. Taking a deep breath, he decided to step off the precipice of fear. "I believe in the power of genuine connection," he said, steadying himself. "Marketing isn't just about numbers and data, it's about telling stories that resonate with people." As he spoke, he could feel their interest shift. It was as if he had lit a fuse, igniting genuine curiosity among the panel members. He shared stories about a campaign where they had tapped into user-generated content. The engagement had skyrocketed, but more importantly, it had fostered a community around the brand. Lee leaned in, intrigued. The question struck him like lightning. He remembered a specific instance during his internship when a crucial campaign fell apart just days before its launch. With the clock ticking, Jacob had gathered his team and facilitated a brainstorming session. The tension was palpable, everyone feeling the weight of failure, but they pushed through, and in a moment of vulnerability, they combined their ideas, which led to a campaign that ended up winning accolades. "They trusted me to lead, and I knew I had to bring us together," Jacob explained, the story unfolding like a movie in his mind. The result focused on a storytelling approach, highlighting real experiences over product features. The energy in the room shifted again. He could see engagement on their faces, a glimmer of appreciation igniting the air. As the interview rolled on, the questions became more in-depth, and Jacob felt the tension slip away. They were genuinely interested in his insights and perspective. With every answer, he could feel his confidence building, pulling him from the shadows of uncertainty toward the spotlight of excitement. But in the back of his mind, a flicker of doubt remained. What if this moment didn't lead anywhere? What if he left this room only to remain a dreamer, struggling to find his place? As if sensing his thoughts, Lee smiled and said, "You've given us a great deal to consider today." Relief washed over him, but it was quickly followed by a reminder of the waiting game. The interview wasn't over until he knew whether he had truly made an impression. After the meeting, he stepped back into the lobby, the weight of anticipation heavy on his shoulders. The reality of what had just happened began to settle in. He had shared pieces of his journey but still had no idea what would come next. He leaned against the wall, watching the ebb and flow of people, and caught sight of the executive access list again. Each name emblazoned there represented victories, hard work, and resilience. What if his name could join them? The thought filled him with warmth, but another wave of fear hit him as he realized how close he was to achieving what he wanted. Would he get a call? Would they choose him? The not knowing was a tightrope walk of anxiety. Just as he turned to leave the lobby, the elevator doors opened with a soft ding, revealing a handful of eager young professionals, all moving with purpose. One of them turned and smiled at Jacob. "Hey, yes," he replied, feeling a flicker of camaraderie with them. She said, and her enthusiasm seeped into him like sunlight breaking through clouds. Jacob said, feeling a surge of hope ripple through him. Maybe he was not alone in this after all. Time passed slowly, each tick of the clock echoing in his mind as he waited for news. He wandered through the lobby, watching the bright world of ambition around him, absorbing every moment. They slipped through conversations and laughter, people engaging in their own stories while Jacob held his breath, waiting for his. And then, just when Jacob thought he might burst from anticipation, the receptionist called him back over. Jacob, his heart raced as he made his way toward her, a swirl of emotions tugging at him. Yes, her eyes sparkled with excitement. The words struck him to the core. Jacob's thoughts raced. Was this real? He felt his heart beat wildly in his chest as he turned to glance at the list displayed behind her. And there it was, his name, Jacob Miller, bold and clear, a part of that prestigious list. For a moment, everything around him blurred into the background. He was consumed by the enormity of the sentiment. The long hours, the uncertainty, the waiting, it all culminated into this. He had fought to claim his place. He exclaimed, almost breathless, "My name, yes, we're thrilled to have you on board," she said, her voice bubbling with enthusiasm. Relief and joy washed over him in waves as he stood there, absorbing the moment. The fear that had gripped him moments before began to dissolve. He had not just wanted this opportunity, he had earned it. The elevator doors shimmered invitingly, and with a steady breath, Jacob stepped toward them. This was more than just a ride up, it was an ascension into his future, a bridge connecting ambition with reality. As he pressed the button and felt the doors close behind him, a profound calm settled within. He wasn't merely Jacob the dreamer, he was Jacob, a part of this thriving community. Each floor ticked away with a soft chime, and as the elevator ascended, he felt like he was soaring into the opposite of uncertainty. The waiting game had been a necessary phase, but now he was ready to embrace the challenge ahead. When the doors opened onto the executive floor, Jacob stepped out, confidence surging through him. He was walking into a realm filled with knowledge, creativity, and inspiration. Every interaction, every question, and every answer had led him to this moment. He was a part of something greater now, just a heartbeat away from turning dreams into plans and plans into achievements. And as he moved forward, Jacob understood that waiting in silence was sometimes just the precursor to great things. The echoes of his dreams didn't just trail behind him, they propelled him forward. Now he was ready to make an impact. The silence had ended, and he was ready to let the world hear his voice. As he walked into this new chapter, he realized his journey was just beginning, a fresh page waiting for him to write his story. He stood outside the colossal glass doors of the corporate tower, the morning sun glinting off the polished surface. Jacob glanced down at his hands, clammy against the crisp edges of his neatly folded resume. Today wasn't supposed to feel like this, a tight coil of anxiety winding in his stomach. He had envisioned confidence, not the fear gnawing at him like a relentless beast. The lobby buzzed with the vibrant energy of busy professionals, laughter mingling with serious discussions about deadlines and strategies. Jacob stared into that whirlwind, feeling like a speck of dust in a grand, bustling universe. Every person he passed seemed defined by purpose, moving through the world effortlessly. But he felt adrift, a solitary island in a sea of ambition. He took a deep breath, the kind that felt like a prelude to so much more. Today was the final interview for a marketing coordinator position. He had worked tirelessly for this opportunity, pouring months into perfecting his portfolio, crafting the ideal resume, and practicing answers to questions that danced in his mind. But now, as he stood at the threshold, doubt threatened to drown him. The thought echoed in his mind, louder than the conversations around him. He remembered evenings spent studying case studies and practicing pitches in front of a mirror, each moment filled with promise. But standing here now, that promise seemed distant. Just as he turned to leave, the elevator doors opened with a soft ding, and he hesitated. What if he let this moment slip away? He caught a glimpse of the executive access list displayed adjacent to the entrance, the names of towering figures in the industry, people whose words shaped trends and whose ideas sparked revolutions. Would he ever see his name on that list? With a surge of courage, he stepped forward, pushing through the glass doors into the lobby. He had come too far to turn back now. Receptionist looked up and smiled, her warmth igniting a flicker of hope within him. "Hi there," she asked with a friendly lilt. "Yes," Jacob replied, trying to keep his voice steady. Great, they've been waiting for you. Just head through those doors, she said, motioning toward a set of double doors that seemed to gleam under the bright lights. Those doors stood like a gateway to a new world. Jacob's heart raced as he stepped across the threshold, entering the conference room. The atmosphere was charged with energy. A long table stretched before him, surrounded by sharp-witted executives ready to assess every facet of his character and skills. Laughter filled the air, but he felt tension coil inside him. Lee Hastings, the vice president of marketing, smiled from the head of the table, her presence both commanding and comforting. Her reputation for being a pioneer in the industry preceded her, and Jacob had idolized her from afar. Seeing her in person ignited both excitement and fear. "Thank you for having me," he said, trying to project confidence despite the whirlwind of uncertainty within. The questions flowed like a river, each one challenging him to dig deep into his experiences. He spoke about a digital marketing campaign he had crafted in college, sharing how his team had garnered increased engagement by tapping into real stories from their audience. With every word, he could feel himself coming alive, but then doubt crept in again. As Lee asked further questions, Jacob's heart pounded in his chest. He recalled the moment of failure during an internship when a campaign derailed 2 days before the launch. The pressure had felt unbearable. It was then he had learned the importance of adaptability, how setbacks could morph into opportunities. "Tell us more about your approach to problem solving," one of the executives interjected, leaning forward, curiosity shining in his eyes. Jacob glanced around the room, his mind racing. "During my internship, we faced a last-minute change when a vendor fell through. Instead of spiraling, we regrouped, brainstorming in a high-pressure session. We decided to pivot our focus and create a campaign based on user-generated content." The executives exchanged glances, and for the first time, Jacob sensed a shift. They leaned closer, engaged, interested. He poured every ounce of himself into that moment, his words igniting sparks of curiosity. But even while speaking, a nagging thought lingered: would this be enough? His mind raced through scenarios where he had failed before, moments that left him feeling invisible. What if this dream was just a dream, slipping further away as he reached for it? Finally, Lee wrapped up the meeting with a smile. "Thank you for your insightful answers, Jacob." Jacob exhaled, relief washing over him, but a wave of uncertainty still crashed inside. What would they decide? The waiting game began all over again, and with it, the tension coiled tighter in his chest. He stepped back into the lobby, the vibrant energy around him contrasting sharply with the quiet battle in his mind. The sound of laughter echoed, and he felt overwhelmed by the pressure of anticipation. Leaning against a nearby wall, he held his breath, replaying the interview in his mind, questioning every answer he had given. Just then, a group of confident young professionals entered the lobby. They were just arriving for their interviews, full of energy and hope. One of them turned to Jacob, catching his eye. "Yes," Jacob replied, surprised at how the warmth of her smile melted some of his anxiety. She said, her voice brimming with encouragement. "Thanks," Jacob said, feeling a flicker of excitement ignite within him again. Perhaps he wasn't alone in this world. Perhaps they were all fighting for their dream just like he was. The hours ticked by with excruciating slowness, each second a reminder of the stakes. Jacob kept returning to the executive access list, wondering if he would ever see his name there, wondering if he could become one of those dream makers. When the receptionist finally called him back, he turned sharply, racing toward the desk. "Jacob," his heart raced, hope and anxiety colliding in a whirlwind. "Yes, you've been given access to the executive elevator," she exclaimed, her excitement palpable. Confusion washed over him. She pointed to the digital access list. "It means we're excited about you joining our team." Momentarily stunned, Jacob gaped at the display. His name, Jacob Miller, brightened the screen like a beacon in the night. The reality of it washed over him in waves, fueling his dreams and aspirations all over again. "What?" he asked, disbelieving. Yes, in that moment everything around him dimmed. The hustle and bustle of the lobby faded, replaced by the thundering pulse of his heart. Would this be real? Had he really crossed the threshold from uncertainty into the life he had only envisioned? As the adrenaline surged through him, the elevator doors gleamed just a few feet away, an inviting portal to the new life waiting for him. Jacob took a deep breath, heart racing with excitement and fear. This was his chance to step up and into a space he had longed for, but could he really seize this moment? He pressed the elevator button, each chime echoing his transformation. The doors slid open, revealing an empty space, the walls polished and inviting. He stepped inside, feeling both overwhelmed and exhilarated. As the doors closed and the elevator lurched upward, Jacob couldn't shake the feeling that something monumental was about to happen. What awaited him on the executive floor? With each passing second, he felt the weight of expectations pressing against him like a tidal wave, threatening to wash away the dreams he had just begun to dare to believe in. But before he could settle into his thoughts, the elevator came to a jolting stop, and the doors slowly slid open. What he saw jolted his heart. The space beyond was not what he expected. Instead of the grand office with bustling employees, he found chaos. Papers were strewn everywhere, and voices raised in the heat of a debate filled the air. Jacob whispered, steeling himself for what might come next. As he stepped out, the energy shifted unpredictably. Heads turned, eyes landed on him, and for a fraction of a second, he felt like an imposter standing in the eye of a storm. Suddenly, Lee emerged from the crowd, urgency in her tone. "Jacob, you made it." Jacob's mind raced. He had expected a welcome, not chaos. "Just trust me, we're in the middle of a crisis, and your insights from the interview." Before he could fully grasp the chaos, the weight of the moment descended upon him like a hammer striking iron. Here was an unexpected challenge, a test that could shape the trajectory of his career in ways he never imagined. His pulse quickened as he stepped deeper into the fray. This was no ordinary welcome, it was a call to arms. This was the defining moment he had waited for, a chance to prove that he belonged here, ready to transform not only his future, but the future of the company. What would he do next? As he took a deep breath, he felt the rising tide of possibility crash against him, pulling him into the heart of the storm. Jacob Miller was here to claim his fate, and there was no turning back.